Hey, what's up, everybody? We're back for Overlord Light Novel Volume 6. That's where we're at. So we pick up exactly where we left off with Volume 5. Volume 5 and Volume 6 are kind of like one arc, if you will. They kind of have a little bit different, but they're all about the Re-Estize Kingdom and everything that's going on there. So we open up with the trial of Sebus about the whole Tuari situation. There's a bunch of back and forth with everybody, but essentially what we need to know is that Sebus is ordered to kill Tuari. He goes to do it, and then he's stopped by Cocytus because this was a test of his loyalty. Right? That was the whole trial. Was like a Sebus, because Ainz, I haven't talked about this too much, but he was super concerned about when Shaltir got corrupted or whatever, and so he's got a lot of like concerns about other people being corrupted or betraying him, or like, he's got a lot of self-doubt, which makes him like a good like Gary Sue or whatever. Because even though he's like completely unbeatable and super strong and stuff, he's very cautious because he has so much self-doubt in himself and his ability to lead and to accomplish everything that he wants to accomplish. And so, a lot of the drama that comes with him particularly is him dealing with his subordinates and like trying to maintain like an air of complete competence when he's completely incompetent and everything. So it's pretty good. So after Sebus passes the test, Tuari is allowed to remain in the service of the great Tomb of Nazariq as one of the maids. And they take Tuari away to start training her like the Pallades, but before they go, he gets a little smooch, or he takes her away to put with the maid so she can start getting her training, and then they smooch a little bit, and then Sebus returns, and they argue a little bit about what to do with Tuari. Demiurge and Sebus bicker, and if you remember from when I mentioned this before, there was a conversation with who was it? It was Shaltir. It was Shaltir and Sebus about how Demiurge and Sebus do not like each other, and like their masters did not like each other, but at the same, they like actually really don't like each other. And this leads Ainz to a flashback of their creators who also fought all the time. This is why their personalities just don't match, right? Like, so Sebus he was created by the guy who's like super altruistic and wanted to help people and make things better, while Demiurge's master probably was not. He was probably all about metagaming and stuff. So he's like, what are you doing? You're wasting this time. Anyway, so they finally decide to keep Tuari here. He took her aside. He took her. Did he bring her in? Sorry, my notes are all jacked up. I apologize. Anyway, so now she eventually becomes a maid of the place. I think that happens now. So Ainz calls her back and tells her that she can stay and be a maid, but if she does that, she can never leave under any circumstance. And she's like, "Fuck leaving, I don't care." And then we find out there's an elf in the Pallades, so kind of like human, since everyone else is like an evil class or whatever, or race or something. And then everybody finally like leaves, and then Demiurge is standing around. He asks permission to be gone a while on a task that he wants to do, and Ainz is like, sure, why not, go for it. And then Demiurge asks about Tuari and his decision to let her keep her out or whatnot, and then Ainz pulls out a book, which is the journal of Nina the Wizard from the group that was traveling, like the Swords of Darkness or whatever. And it turns out that Nina was a girl, right? I was right, and then I was wrong, and then I was right again. So Nina was a girl. She was hiding that she was a girl, and she had a sister. What? That's right. She had a younger sister. And he thinks about how much the Swords of Darkness taught him about adventuring, about the world, and how he felt like he owed a debt to them because he let them die, essentially, after they did so much stuff for him to help better his understanding of the world and protect Nazariq. And that the sister, like I said, is Tuari, so he's paying back Nina and kind of like the Swords of Darkness generally through taking care of Tuari. And that's the main reason why he's fine with Tuari being here. And the whole thing is just like random happenstance. Tuari just happens to be the slave girl who was like rescued by Sebus, and Ainz is like, yes. And then he thinks about all that, and then he tells Demiurge that you must return kindness for kindness and evil for evil. And Demiurge is like, oh, very wise, my lord, and like nods and leaves about his business. A bit later, Sebus and Solution return to the city, and they want to say goodbye to all their contacts because, like, the whole thing with the slavers and everything kind of like messed stuff up. So they're going to head back, and they mention that they've been ordered back to like their homeland or whatever. Afterwards, after they meet with all the contacts and kind of like do what they got to do with that. They return to the manor and find that, and for some reason they took Tuari back with them, which I can't remember why they did that, but they find that Tuari was kidnapped while that was all that was going on. Back at the tomb, Albedo has been assigned her own room, and that she can like enjoy, and that's one of the things like Ainz is trying to do as like a middle manager from his human experience, is to get everybody like space, so it's not just like they're not just like standing in hallways all the time. And so she has this room, and the whole room is filled with stuffies and body pillows of Ainz, and she's enjoying being there in her harem of Ainz, as she calls it, when Ainz actually walks in and mentions that Tuari was kidnapped and that he will not stand for like his people or his property to be kidnapped, and because, you know, she's under his protection, so it's an affront to him directly. And he's like, get Demiurge and get Demiurge to fix it. And she's like, yes, my lord, I will. After he leaves, she looks at some of her, she looks at some pendant, and she gets like super angry. Elsewhere, Bran returns to Gazov's place. They chat about their past adventures, about Gazov serving the king and all that, and then Bran tells him about the the situation, and then they talk about the brothel that they jacked up with Climb and whatnot, and Gazov's like, good, there's not something we could have done because they ate fingers and all that bullshit, but I'm glad you took care of it. That's excellent. Over at the castle, the Blue Roses arrive to meet with the princess and with Climb. They talk about the brothel raid, and they talk about the changing timelines of such on their attacks on the Eight Fingers. They also discuss bringing Marquis Raven on board, and they will come to him with information that they have to elicit his help. And then Princess Rhaenyra mentions that he can't be trusted, or they ask about him being trustworthy, and she's like, yeah, I think so. Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out. We'll see how he plays his hands. A bit later, Raven comes along with Rhaenyra's older half-brother, Arthur or something. Anyway, the Prince and Raven were talking a little bit earlier. They dismiss everyone, so it's just Rhaenyra, the Prince, and Raven. And we learn that Raven is on, even though he's like the leader of like the nobles faction of like the Game of Thrones stuff that's going on, he actually 100% supports the king in the internal conflict, and they actually want to get the prince to rule the kingdom, like the prince he's with, because there's an older prince and he's an idiot. I think there's two older princes and they're both idiots, but this other prince, he's much more intelligent and he's much more willing to like help the people. So him and Rhaenyra are kind of like on the same page with like giving people more rights and getting rid of the conscription kind of stuff and like all that stuff. And so the whole thing with him just like being in the nobles faction and whatnot is like all pretend to kind of like gain more power. And Rhaenyra's like, yeah, of course I knew that, right? And because they bring it to her as like a surprise, and then she knows a lot. And we find out that she's a genius. And she's such a genius that even at an early age, she was smarter than like most adults. Like she's like a complete psychopath kind of genius. And yes, and she's also a complete psychopath. And so she started to kind of go crazy at an early age. But then like instead of going like completely off the deep end, her puppy, which is Climb, like which she refers to him essentially as like her little puppy, saved her from kind of going completely off the deep end because it gave her something to like care for and to love unconditionally. And so she loves her little puppy and nothing will ever happen to it, or like that'll be the end of like everybody or some crazy thing like that. And because Climb loves her unconditionally, it grounds her a little bit, so she's able to like utilize her psychopathic genius without like completely losing it. Yeah. And so Raven's like, let us talk to the actual Princess Rhaenyra, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm here. And so they start planning and scheming at that point, so that the Marquis. Oh yeah. And so what they're going to do is the Marquis has a son, Maddie or something, and so what they're going to do is they're going to marry Rhaenyra to his son so that he can enter, so that Raven can be a part of like the king's household, which will help like smooth things over with like the internal conflicts and all that stuff. And then it will also kind of like take care of Rhaenyra, because then she won't be like an issue when it comes to like the lineage or whatnot, because she's going to like marry into like the Marquis. The Marquis is like, you know, one of the highest. It's the Marquis in this universe is like the highest ranking. Not rank, what is it called? So there's like dukes and barons, and Marquis is like the highest, and then it's like king right after Marquis, and so that's good. Like him marrying that is totally fine. But in reality, she's actually going to be with Climb, because she's no way she can actually be with Climb, but she wants to be with Climb. So the whole marriage is just kind of like a show marriage, which is fine. Everyone's like, yeah, we got it. And then and then like, so she'll have kids with Climb, but then like the Marquis will have like an heir officially, which will be her and Clime's son, which will be like the Marquis's grandson essentially. So that'll tie him in, and then make him. Then he'll be in like the line of possible rulers or something. Look at all the titles and bullshit and stuff. Sounds good. So then they discuss the raids, all the 8 locations that they're going to try to raid at the same time, but there's only 5 blue roses. So they talk about the 6 arms and compare them to Adamantite adventurers. They then get a knock at the door, and this person that is there will take care of this location number 6. And we find out that this person is Gazov. Yay! Anyway, a bit later, Climb is getting ready with Gassoff, the Blue Roses, and the Marquis men. He's going to lead one of the squads, but he's going to go incognito, so he's not going to wear his like beautiful white armor right now. He talks to the Muscle Mommy. Her name starts with an M, Magda or something, for a bit, and also to Gassoff and Bran about everything that's going on. Meanwhile, Demiurge is leading a force that includes some Pleiades, Shaltir, Mari, and a bunch of his minions to completely eradicate the 8 Fingers, because they're the ones who kidnapped Tuari. And showing an affront eye, and so like now they must die. So it'll kill every single person. And there's one person they're not allowed to kill, and so they get to see that person. Before that, Sebus is told to go get Tuari and head back to Nazariq, and then Solution will assist him. Shaltir is in reserve because they don't want any nonsense with like the blood frenzy going on. And she's kind of put out by the whole thing, but you know, it is what it is. Elsewhere, back to Climb and Bran, along with an Oraculium level thief, are watching one of the sites. They send the thief in. He returns to report that a woman is being held in there, and that all the members of the 6 arms are there. And they can't take all 6 of them, so they get ready to retreat and go help the others, when Sebus just like moseys on up, and they're like, "Oh hey Sebus, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "I need to rescue that girl." And he's like, "Well, you rescue the girl, I'll take care of everybody." And they're like, "Sure." So they get like some invisibility magic or something, so they can all, with like the thief, he can make them all invisible and whatnot, and then Sebus is just gonna go like wreck shop, and they're gonna rescue her. So Sebus just like strolls up to the front gate. The 6 arms are all there, aside from Zero, I think, who is not there. And Zero's the leader. And he's like, "Where's the girl?" And they talk about how they're gonna torture him and kill him, and like, you know, they brag about it, and they talk really, really offensively. And then there's some people up on the balcony watching, and he massacres all of them in like 20 seconds. Like, and then he runs into like the building and kills everybody. And he gives a command for Solution to keep some of the guys alive for questioning later. Elsewhere, Climb and the thief and Bran move silently to the prison, and they're like, "Hey, something's like really off here," but they can't like quite figure out what it is. But then they rescue Tunari, who, when they rescue her, she doesn't say anything, and they find out that they got played by Zero because it was all a trap. Tunari is really the illusionist guy that I thought was dead before, but I guess he survived. And then Climb and the thief start to fight him, and between Climb and the thief, they're able to defeat the illusionist guy. But then Bran is fighting Zero, and things start to turn against Bran when Sebus rolls in with Tunari, so he didn't need them at all because they did absolutely nothing for it. He just took care of all of it by himself. So good. He announced that he killed the other 6 arms. Zero gets mad and uses his most powerful attack to one-punch man Sebus, who just takes the punch like it's nothing, and then and then like axe chops. Am I on the wrong side of this? I think I'm on the wrong side of this road. Sorry. There was no sign. It's very odd. Okay. Anyway. So yeah, axe chops the guy like in half. And the others are like, "Holy shit." What just fucking happened? And he's like, "All right, time to go." So they all leave. Once outside, they see a giant flame wall in the distance. Bran, the thief guy, and Climb head back to the castle to reconnoiter with everybody, because this flame wall seems like a huge emergency. And then Sebus takes Tuari back to Nazariq. Next, we flip over to one of the Eight Fingers. She is the drug lady. So we met her previously in the last book momentarily when they were talking about how she needed some extra help because all her like crops were being burned or whatnot. And then we learn a little bit about her background, about like how she started as a prostitute and then worked her way up and then took over here with the Eight Fingers and stuff. And at some point she's like getting ready for the day and notices there's no sound. So she starts looking around and eventually she finds this little this little dark elf girl. And it's Mari, of course. Everyone thinks he's a girl. Mari asks if she is the master of the home. And she's like, yes. And he's like, good. Then Entima shows up, the spider lady dressed as a doll maid. She walks in the room like eating some guy and talks about how fool she is for meeting all the people at the manor. And then Mari grabs Liddy and drags her off, thinking about how they are thinking about how they're what they're going to do with her. A bit later, Entima is chewing on a leg or something and thinking about how she's late. And then while she's walking along, the Muscle Mommy stops. Entima is like, go away. I don't like killing you. And Muscle Mommy is like, die. And so Entima beats the shit out of her, almost killing her when one of the ninja girls show up. I think there's two of them. There's like Tia and other Tia. And then Entima beats the shit out of both of them. Is about to kill them when Evil Eye, the mage of the Blue Rose adventurers group, shows up. She has some sort of like anti-bug spell, and since Entima is a bug summoner who is also a bug, this puts her in like a real problem. So the other two are able to like heal themselves, and now finally it's like an even fight, 3 versus 1 for Entima. And so they go back and forth for a little bit. Finally, they kind of get Entima down and are about to execute her when Demiurge shows up and sends Entima away. Evil Eye tells her companions to run because she senses like the evil force coming from Demiurge and how powerful it is. And he's wearing like a silly mask and has a suit on because he's pretending to be somebody else, I guess. And then she mentions that he's stronger than even like a platinum dragon, which we have no reference what a platinum dragon is, but there you go. So the girls start to run and he kills them with the flame wall, and that's the flame wall everyone saw earlier. And then she freaks out and uses a couple of like attacks that do absolutely nothing. Demiurge is about to strike when Momon lands between them and asks who the enemy is, and then we get like an intermission. We switch over to the Empire. The Emperor, Jarek or something, he is sitting listening to his advisors at his throne, and this old man comes strolling in, and they talk about how he's maybe like the most powerful mage in the entire world. Fluker, I think. He's definitely in the Empire, the surrounding area, and he's talking about how he can't find anything about he can't figure out what happened with the magic levels for the whole like Ainz and Gazloff incident from like the first book, and he gets super excited because the last time he met a mage that was better than him was like 250 years ago, and it was one of the great heroes, but he may be better than her at this juncture. But this Ainz character seems to be doing magic that is like way beyond what he could be even imagine doing. They talk about allying with Ainz if they can find out where he's at, and then they also mention Henri's village, but they're gonna leave it alone for now because they don't want to come on too strong. Back over with Momon, we go back in time a little bit before he landed in front of Demiurge and Evil Eye, and Momon and Nabe are flying on the back of like a panel because the two mages that are helping them to get there, they can't, like, Nabe and Momon can both fly. They have flying magic, right? But like in this world, they can't like use the flying magic or whatever, and so they have to float this like panel or something and then carry them on that. And so Momon thinks back to like how we even got here, so we go back even further. And he mentions that he was hired by Marquis Raven to guard his house in the capital, but that was pretty far away. And it was too far away to get to by horseback, and so they had to use some other means because they can also teleport, but they can't show people they can actually teleport, right? Because their whole cover story thing. And so they're getting taken to the capital on this panel because that's like the fastest way to do it for this whole thing that's going to go on. And then he thinks about how like the paycheck from Mercury Raven was phenomenal, so of course he's going to do it. And then while him and Nabe are floating along, he sees the firewall and he orders the mages to like fly him down so he can hop down. So back forward in time to the present, he lands. Evil Eye begs for his help, so him and Demiurge fight for a little bit before Demiurge reveals that they are looking for an artifact that hurts demons in the capital. He then takes off. Evil Eye is getting hot and bothered about Momon. She wants to like jump his boats. And then Nabe shows up and Evil Eye mentions Etima. Momon gets kind of pissed until Evil Eye reveals that she got away, right? Because obviously he's concerned about his people, and if like something happened to Etima, he'd be like Superman. But Evil Eye gets kind of confused why he's so concerned about it. They then talk about resurrection magic and how the head of the Blue Roses has enough power and ability to use resurrection magic. But that resurrection magic, they talk about the whole thing with like resurrection magic taking a part of someone's life and whatnot. So if they use it on someone who's weak, they'll just dissolve into nothing, essentially. And then he learns that these guys are adamantite adventurers, so they will be okay. You know, they have the strength to do it. They'll be weaker than they were before, but they'll be alive. Momon then steps aside with Nabe to talk for a little bit. Evil Eye's distracted with lust for Momon, thinking about him putting a baby in her and all that stuff. And after Nabe steps away, Ainz freaks out a bit about like how so after they step away, we go to Ainz talking to Nabe and thinking about, he's like, what the heck is Demiurge planning here? Like, what's he doing here? Yada, yada, yada. He wants Nabe to go check in with him. That way, if there's a misunderstanding, it will be because of the game of telephone, right? And he's like, oh, excellent idea. Because I don't want them to think that he doesn't know what's going on. So he's going to send Nabe, and if there's confusion, then he can just blame that. Later, Momon is meeting with Gasoff and a bunch of adventurers. Guildmaster of the Adventurers Guild is leading this meeting. Normally, the Adventurers Guild would stay out of like state-level affairs, but this thing with the demon and Demiurge is pretending to be is like pretty serious. So he's created some sort of black wall of fire in a different part of town where he's supposed to be looking for this item that he mentioned to Momon and Evil Eye earlier. They talk about the plan to attack, the plan of attack, and that there's going to be all levels of adventurers will support the higher ranking teams, the adamantite teams like Momon, Nabe, and Blue Roses. Then there's like a little meet and greet. Ainz thinks about how it is kind of like a Japanese corporate culture. He shakes hands, talks to a lot of guys, lower ranks, and they're all very impressed by that. The high-ranked adventure teams. Gasoff wants to speak with him, but he sends Nabe because he doesn't want Gasoff to realize that it's Ainz or whatever. After a while, he goes to meet with the princess. Evil Eye is hanging out with him the whole time, being horny as fuck. In the meeting with the princess, they confirm plans. Momon will lead as the arrow. The others will follow. Climb brings up Sebus, which Bran backs him up on. It's like Sebus isn't somebody they could get to help them. And the whole time, it's like talking about it, Evil Eye acts like a protective wife for Momon and says bringing someone else in would insult Momon's ability and stuff like that. They go back and forth for a little bit, then they agree they don't have time to go search out for Sebus. And then Ainz thinks about Sebus. And then he thinks about, did Sebus tell him about Climb during his whole thing? Because they clearly know each other. And he didn't read the whole report. So maybe he did. Anyway, they all leave, and the prince and the Marquis Raven roll in. They mention that the princess is bringing the guards in who cannot do anything, and she says they carry food. They're like food for the demons to protect the citizens. And they're like, okay, that makes sense in like some horrible dark way. They then talk about putting Climb in danger, and the princess has a whole plan to make sure nothing happens to him. And Raven is like, damn, she is so fucking evil. Later, Lacuse is leading a group of adventurers through the firewall. Lacuse is one of the Blue Roses. It's all for show. Someone detects hellhounds. She thinks about how Evil Eye is doing some meditation to get her magic back so she can help Momon with the Demiurge fight. Someone asks about power levels, and they're like, oh, if Entima's like a 150, Demiurge is like a 200, Lacuse, who's the head of the Blue Roses, is like a 90, and Evil Eye is about a 150 as well. The Hellhounds then rush in, and they're able to hold them off. Now, this talk of power levels, it doesn't like come up like, it might never, I haven't read all the books, but through book like 10, it like does not come up again, so it's kind of funny that they talk about it here. Meanwhile, Climb and Bran and their thief homie travel the outskirts of like this black fire thingy. Bran sees a girl that could only be Shaltir as they're like traveling around, like there's a girl with like a mask just like standing looking around high up on the building. So he tells the other two he's gonna to go after without explaining what he's doing. He's like, yeah, I'll be right back. And he realizes, he's thinking about how she is as strong as Sebus, if not stronger. And so he wants to distract her to make sure that their two are okay. You know, it's kind of got like a noble purpose for that whole thing. And then, so he goes up and he like taunts her, and Shelter's like, I don't know who you are. And she's wearing a mask, and he's going to attack her, and she's like, okay, if you really want to. So he does his like ultimate attack, but it's even more powered up now because he's been training really hard, and it chips one of her nails, and then he laughs in triumph, and she's like, the fuck is wrong with you? It's like a tiny piece of her nail, which, you know, when they met before, he could do nothing. And then she's about to chase after him, but then she gets a call from Demiurge about the battle beginning, and gives up on chasing after Bran because, like, it's a waste of her time. And so Fama nooses. And then she's thinking that she could just stop time and follow him. And then so she does stop time, and she's like, I'm just going to hop down there and kill this motherfucker. And then she sees something and is like, oh, wait, that's that person they told us not to fuck with. And so she's like, never mind. Later, Bran finds Climb and the thief waiting for him. He chews them out because he told them to run ahead because he was concerned for their safety. And then Climb's like, sorry, but we wanted to make sure you were okay and all this stuff, but now I'll follow your orders. Maybe. Elsewhere, the city guards are freaking out. They start to get attacked by demons. The guard captain nopes out of the whole situation, but then they're saved by Momon. Elsewhere, still, Lacruz is leading the adventure, still fighting the Hellhounds, and they have to hold out for Momon and Evil Eye, who are on their way. They're fighting endless hordes and all that stuff, and then she determines they need to retreat. But even after using like a super attack, the numbers are too big. They then get rescued by the king, who is with the Royal Select, including Gazov and the army, and they save them. And then the ninja girl and the muscle mommy, who were resurrected and were recovering, are there too. And she's like, you should be resting. And they're like, no, we had to come, blah, blah, yay, hooray, anime. And then and then Momon, Nabe, and Evil Eye over to them. They make it to where Demiurge is, and then 5 of the Pleiades like show up, and Evil Eye freaks out because they're all super strong. And Momon is like, you got this, and wanders off to fight Demiurge by himself. And then Nabe is like, I got 3 of you, get the other 2, and the battle begins. Momon and Demiurge just head inside into a warehouse. Mari is there, and they chat about Demiurge's plan, how he's creating a demon to kind of like give these people like something to be afraid of. And it'll be good for like some other missions too. They talk about that a little bit. He's also talking about how they've destroyed like all the cash. Like they're using this demon thing as like a cover to like absolutely destroy the 8 Fingers and completely rob the kingdom and the 8 Fingers of all their stuff. But, you know, making it look like it's just like random destruction around town. They also captured a whole bunch of humans for research. They talk about that. They talk about the battle. I just like, you probably should rough me up a little bit just so it looks like there was a good fight. I don't want to just like roll out of here and be like, I beat him, nothing happened. And then Mari's going to like do an earthquake or something just to make it like even more dramatic and exciting. Meanwhile, Nabe and the other 3 battle mates, they get away from Evil Eye, and then they just like chill and catch up and talk about boys and whatnot. They talk about Evil Eye is powerful at about just what Nabe's been up to out here doing mercenary stuff. Bouncing back to Bran and Climb. They are in a house full of civilians. Bran tells them to, like, the civilians to shut up and do what they're told, or they'll be killed by demons. And they start shuffling them out of there. And then a large demon shows up and the 3 of them get ready to fight. Meanwhile, Evil Eye is struggling against the 2 Pleiades when Nabe gets blasted out of where she's at, and then Momon and Demiurge roll out. They compliment each other a lot, and then Demiurge is like, I will flee and we can fight again someday, as you have beat me today. And then Evil Eye gets mad that Momon is going to let him go, but Demiurge points out his foot. Like if the battle goes all out, it could destroy a large part of the city and the town, and they don't want to do that. And so she finally sees Momon's wisdom in that. And at some point around here, we learn that she's a vampire. Like she's thinking about how she's undead and she's lived for a long time, and part of her power and the reason she masks up and doesn't show anybody herself is because she's actually a vampire. And then all the demons like nope the fuck out of there. And so Momon, Nabe, and Evil Eye return to the other adventurers. Evil Eye continues to like be all over Momon's dick and want to like put a baby in her and all that stuff, and tells him they should celebrate the victory and stuff. And he gets kind of embarrassed by like the way she's acting, and then he's like, all right, well, I'll, you know, and he's like, cheers, we did this, and he does like a speech kind of thing. And this leads us to the epilogue, where Tuari gets put into the maids. I know I said that like super earlier, but this is where it officially happens. Sebus asks the head of the maids, who's this like dog chick, to push her, but remember that she is human. And she mentions Sebus, yeah, they're going to take care of her because they're excited for Sebus and her to get married and have children. And then he gets super embarrassed. Meanwhile, over back at the kingdom, Climb meets with Rainier, who, he's been super busy kind of helping to clean up and get civilians like moved around and take care of all this stuff, and she wants to meet some of the people that they saved, but Climb knows that they're very ungrateful about being saved, and so he wants to spare Rainier from having to deal with the assholes essentially. And so he's like, oh yeah, not right now, now's not a great time, but maybe later we can make that happen. And then, you know, after he leaves, she laughs wickedly because she knows exactly why he's trying to protect her and she loves him so much and all that stuff. She then mentions that that all the ladies that were rescued from the brothel, that they're all dead, and that the mercenaries she sent to protect them, because essentially it was like, oh, we rescued all these people from the brothel, she hired some mercenaries to take them somewhere else, they could be okay, and they got overrun by demons and all got killed. And she pretends to be very sad about this, but obviously she's not sad about this because she's doing some wicked thing with them. Elsewhere, the Blue Roses are talking about Momon returning to the town that he was working at, and how the king gave him like a special dagger which represents nobility, and also how Evil Eye wants Momon to put a baby in her. Lastly, we move to the council room of the Eight Fingers. They are talking about their vast losses, what to do next, and then Mari, and then the drug lady that Mari picked up before, they're like, she's like a shell of a human being at this point. She's like haunted and freaking out, and she's like looking around, and they're like, someone makes some comment about it, and then Aura and Mari just like roll in, and they're all like, hey, you're all under the servitude of Ainz now. And then they try to flee, but they're like stuck in their positions, and they're like, oh, you're trying to leave, huh? That's not gonna work. Guess you guys need a turn in like the chamber of darkness or whatever. And then Aura tells them they're all gonna go to get some like re-education treatment, which essentially is like torture and mind breaking like they did with this lady. And then Mari mentions that the lady was eaten from the inside out by like the lover of fear, or the king of fear or something, and then continuously healed. So she continuously was like devoured from the inside by like cockroaches essentially, and then they like healed her up and then let it happen again so that she would be like very obedient because she knows what's going to happen. And then she starts like really freaking out, and after she agrees to hold down to fort while they go and like torture everybody else and get them in line. And then Aura's like, hey, today's already an excellent day. Which wraps up book 6 of Overlord. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later.